Hi, this is Looking Bad. Welcome to another episode of the Single Quantum Task Development Series. Today, we're going to be looking at generics. What are generics? Generics are a way to write code that works with any type. Instead of being locked in with one specific type, they let you define functions, stocks, or module that are type flexible and reusable. It's one of the most powerful features in Sui Move. So, let's head over to our VS Code and let's try to see how everything works. Um, First of all, um, let me write a function and let me call it identifiable. So let's say I wanted to write a function in which I'll pass in one data type and return data type. So let me write that function. So let me just call this identifiable. So now here my function will take a boolean value. Let me just call it x. That's going to be a boolean value, and it will also return a boolean value. So now this function will do anything it wants to do. Let me just call it do anything and return x, which is also a boolean value. So now, what if I wanted to do this for more other data types? I'll come here, paste, and let me just call it this identify u64. I can call this, then I'll pass in u64. Then let's say I wanted to pass in u8. So if you look at this now, this is kind of like tautology. So um I am passing in, I have to like, if I you know that there's so many data types on Sui Move, I have to write for string, u8. So there's a way of doing this with one function. So right now, I'm just giving it as a scenario, do anything. So there are different things you can do with the function. So now, instead of doing this now, what if I told you the way to like, you can just define your function to take in any data type and return any data type without having, um, maybe without you making your function to be tied to only one data type. If you look at it now, this is our function now, it's only tied to u64 tied to Boolean. So there's a way to do that, which is using generics. So there is like a placeholder of types. So instead of hard coding types like U64 here. Now let me give you an example. So let me call this now here identify identify. So right now I want my X now. So most times in generics you see them using the codes using T. So I want to take any type, I will just call it T here. Then I want to return the type here. So now also we have to define that to our function. To do that, we have to use angular brackets to pass in C. So right now we have to return X from our function. So now see what is happening here. So right now this angular bracket here, you're specifying the type parameter. So the T now is a placeholder for any type, and the same type must be used consistently. So I cannot come here and say maybe U, I come here and use T. It doesn't work that way. So if I'm using U here, I have to change everything here to U and change everything here to U. But let me go back with using T. So right now, if you look at it now, this is way easier than wanting to use only maybe that tied to only one function. So this is that for function. And also it can be of two types. Maybe you can say you want to take two types, maybe U and V, then can just say X will be of type, sorry, T. Let me just use T and V. Then Y will be of type V, and you can choose to return both. You can return T and V. So here I can just come and return both X and Y. So right now, let me write a text. Let me just write a simple text here to test out our code. So we'll call it test identity. So let's say, let me copy this and let me call it identify underscore two. So let me make this one take only one, like before. Let me leave it T. Right now, let's try to paste our first one. Let me say, let's x equal to identify. See, identify. So right now, I can pass in data type. So let me just pass in two. So right now, as I'm passing data type, I have to specify what I'm passing. So right now, the type I'm passing is of type U64. I have to specify it here. So okay, identify underscore two. Right now, I have to specify data type I passed in D. So mind you, so this is these are primitive types. Move can already know, but if you're using like complex data type, you have to specify it. But right now, let me just specify it as U64. So that next time when I do it, you will not be confused. Right now, we have two. So if I pass in two, it will return two. So for that of identify also, let me say let x and y will be equal to identify. Okay, right now I just want to pass me boolean value and maybe it's string. So right now let me just pass in true and then pass in, let's say, hello. Let me call it dot to string. So right now you can also come here. You can come here and specify the type also. So you can see here should be of type bool and here should be of type string. So this is how to use generics with a function. So now let's look at generic stuff. So you're done with generic functions. Let me just comment this code out. Let's comment this part out. So for generic stocks, let me give another example again. So now let's see I'm writing a stock. So I'll call it public stocks. Let me just make it an object. Let me give it key ability. Sorry, public stocks. Let me call it container. And it has a key ability. So now I want this container to hold a particular color value. So let me give it value. So on a normal day, let's say you want your container to hold type 64. You have to put in type 64 here. So now, let's say you wanted a large container again. Once you want to hold boolean values, you have to come here, copy, and create a large container again. Maybe you call this one container. Let's say bool. Sorry, container bool. Then you come here again and change it to boolean. Then if you wanted to create a container for string again, no, this is not actually doable. There's a way you can actually create a container to also hold any type of value you want. So that's using generics again. So now for generic containers, let me come here. Using some container U64. Let me come here and just click on last stop again. Public stopped. Let's call it container. Need to be an object. So now this time my value a ability type u, sorry, id is going to be of type uid. Then the value, well, right now this will be of type t. So right now I will now come here and specify here to take the type of t. So right now this my container here can hold any value of any type. It can hold boolean, strings, it can hold any data type at all. It can also hold a last stocks because now it's a generic, it can hold anything. So it's more valuable or it's more visible than for you to start creating, let's say, that for different a container for different data types. So now that's one of the use, or that's where generics comes in. So more often when you start writing about smooth code, you get used to generic and you use it a lot. because you cannot be tying a stocks, or you cannot be tying a particular object to one data type. So let me come here again and create a function. I'm going to call it public fun. Let's say create. Let me create a container for each first. Let me call it create container U64. I have to pass my character context here to let's container container let me create 64. Let me create that of U64. Then my ID is going to be object new. I'll pass in character context in here. And for my value, I'm just going to put in okay, let me just pass in the value here. So let me just pass in the value here for my function. Going to be of type U64. Right now, my value is going to be value. So right now, I can just publicly share. Okay, this is going to be supposed to be makeable reference. So right now, I can just do transfer, and I'm going to be transferring it. I'm going to be sharing the object. So let me just do share objects and container, just for the example. So this is now for me to create for U64. If I was to create for bool, then I'll put it the same. So I'll not do that. So right now, let me try to create that of a unique container. So this is like I told you before, it's not visible to keep creating different containers. So right now, let's say I wanted to create a container, write a function to create a container for this my stock change. I can pass in any value. So right now, let me just put this create container, and the value now, like I told you before, right now, our value now is going to be of type what T. And also, since you're passing a particular type to our function, you have to come here and also specify here type T. Then our container here, what did I call this? Container. Let me just copy it. I'm not sure I spelled it correctly, but let me just copy it here. So so right now I can still come here again and make this of type T. So if you notice, we are getting an error. Why? Because if you notice before, okay, let me give you this example. If I wanted to put, let me just copy this here. I'll copy this here. Let me just call it this one C. Then let me create this one again, and let me call this D. Let's say, okay, let me just not use a type. Let's say I wanted to save D in C. Now, if you notice, it's an error. It's saying this D here, this stocks D must have the store ability. What is shouting here? Look at it now. It must have the store ability. So we have to come here and put in store. Then the error is gone. So it's the same thing that is happening here. So that's why here this place is shouting that it must have the store ability. So right now, you have to make sure that any data you're saving in here must have the store ability. So we'll not be able to see save any data that does not have the store ability in. It's impossible to put that in in an object. In there, putting a value in an object, it must have the store ability. So right now, we can come here and give this a type. So now to specify a type for a generic, you can just put a column here and we want our object to have a type. Oh, sorry, a store ability. So right now, we have given our object a store ability. So right now, it can safely save in the stocks. Okay, if you're confused, let me find a bit to explain this. Okay, let me write a test. So let me come here. I think if I write a text, you may understand it better. So let me call it tests generic. Now let me call this create counter function. So create secret counter, sorry, create container. So right now we have to give it a financial context. So I can come here and say let's tx equal to um just context dummy. So dummy. Don't be confused. If when we start writing tests, I will show you how to do this. But right now we're trying to just get dummy financial context to pass into our function. So just testing. So I'll go over test how to test in later videos, how to write proper tests. So right now, let me pass my financial context. Then I have to pass in my value. So right now I'm just passing 6, which is going to be of type U64. So we need to reference here. I have to come here and make this U table. So right now, if you look at it now, this works. You're able to pass in 6 because this is a primitive type, so it works. But right now, mind you, I can still come here and just specify U64 here, but it's not always necessary on U64 here, but it's not always necessary. But let me just specify it. So now let's say, let me bring back this struct here, this struct here, and right now, let me use ability. So let me come here and define the struct. Let's see, let the equal to the it has an ID. Or let me just move this, let me just move the key ability for now. Let me just make it a stuff is no ability right now. It has no ability. And let me move the ID. So we just like hot potato. We stock start no ability. So let's call this D. And now let me try to pass D into this function. Yeah. So let me come here now and try to pass in D. I try to pass in D now. Okay. Let me come here also and specify the type to be D. So if I pass this out here now, you see that it's complain. To satisfy this has to have the store ability. So right now, you have to come here now and put the store ability. Okay, come here and say has store. Yeah. So that's the only way you can be able to pass in this stocks in here because we specify that our function must always take the key ability. We can go further and also say that okay, we want this our function, the type we're passing in. That means this data type now. Look at this as data type. So this is data now. Let me just call it data. Let me call it data. So now, this data you're passing now in now. We are coming and specify that okay, we want this type T now. It must have the key ability, the store ability. You can also come here and say it must have the copy ability. And we can come here and still specify. So we can still specify that we want the copy ability. So I'm going to put plus copy and plus drop. Well, mind you, we can't add key here because we cannot keep copy and drop. We can only make we can only keep key. If you have to keep key, we have to get rid of the copy and drop. So right now, let me just use stock copy and drop. So right now, this data will no longer fit in because this data also has to have the copy and drop ability over here for it to be able to pass this data to this function. This is our data. So one thing again, we can come here and also say, also specify that okay, this type that is coming to this function. No, here we did not specify. We can also come here and say, okay, this type that is coming here, it must have the key ability. So we can come here and specify it. We can also specify it must have the store ability also. So sorry, key plus store. So we can specify different abilities we want our data, our container to. So just look at this container T as holding any data. So it can hold a stock, it can hold community types. So we're just trying to specify for community types, the ability does not work. So look at it that way. So right now, if I wanted to come here now and see, okay, this must have key and store ability. I come here also and specify that my stocks here my function here, the type I'm passing must also have the key ability and the store ability. And right now, my data also has to have the key and store ability. So I have to come here and make this an ID. Then object new. Then I have to pass in the international context here. Right now, I come here also and give this the key ability. I'll leave it as key and store and I'll get rid of this copy and drop. Then I'll specify the ID of type UID. So come here also. Okay, it's going to be and mute. So now, right now, if you look at it now, this our data here has the key and stability, and that's why it got into our function also. Well, we can still choose to remove it, it will still pass. So, well, right now, we already specified that in our function here. So don't get things confused. So that's it for also generic stocks. And also, your container here, you can have a container that holds two value. So if I want to have a container that holds two value, I can come here and say public stocks. Let's see, let me call it P. So right now, I want my key ability. So right now, I want this to take in to data. So first of all, I can call this one the first data first and take T, that's the first type. Secondly, I call this second. And let me call this T1 and here T2. So we can pass in so many data here. So T1, we can specify here T2. So we can keep adding T3, T4 as much as we want, then pass it to our function. So don't get this confused. You know the same thing we're doing here, but look at it right here. We're tying it to a specific data type. Why here we're not tying it? We can pass in any data type to our function, just like to our stocks. Just like I specified here. Look at it before. I passed in a stocks. I can come here again and change this and pass in a Boolean value. I'm passing through. So right now, this is not tied. It can take anything. So it is not really tied. So that's what makes generic so special. So you can come here again. I'll copy this here. So right now I can call this create here. And I can pass in, let me just call this T1 and T2 here. And I can take the value. I can just take it first as a so I'll call this first. And this will take in T1. I'll call it second. And it will take T2. So I can come here again. Here, which takes in T1 and T2. And also, what again? I'll specify first and second here. Then right now, for me to transfer it, I showed you the reason why this error is coming up here, but let me just return it. So I won't have that error again. So I can just come here and I choose to just return here. I'll specify the types also. Going to be T1 and T2. Then I can come here and return, let me call this pair and return here. So now, if you notice what's happened here right now, we have this our stocks here which holds two values. So we can pass in two values, T1 and T2. So we created a function where we pass in those two values, T1 and T2. So instead of tying it to a specific data type, we can pass in into the data types we want. So let me come here and let's test it out. So I'll call this create. Yeah. Then let me just pass in the financial context. So it's going to be and mute tx. Then I can pass in into values I want. So now let me just pass in false, which is the Boolean value, and let me pass in, let's say, dates. Then since I am returning that, so let's here to go to this. So right now I can choose to just transfer it here. Well, right now this is not really necessary, so let me just leave it out for now. So you get the points. We can pass in two values. So right now you're passing our first and second value. So this is our stock here now will now come here. T1 now, since we passed in false here, T1 now can now hold false, and T2 can now hold U64. And it can change again. We can choose to pass in any other thing. It can still hold any other thing, any other data at all. Can hold any data, and here also can hold any data. So instead of me to tie it to a specific value, we can still interchange it. So that's the power of generics. So that's it for today's video. So I don't want to make this video very long. I did just an introduction to generics. There's still more to it. And in the next video, I'll be bringing more concepts of generics to you, and we'll be writing almost like a real world example, so you really understand where and when you need to use generics in your smart contracts. So if you're confused, I advise you go back and watch the video again, because I introduced a new concept which might be very confusing to you. Try to play with the codes. Try to play with the code. Go to the move book. Also, can come over to the move book. Try to see how you can read generics. Go back and watch the video again. In the next video, I'll be talking more about stocks and giving you a basic example where you can use stocks. So thank you very much. In case you have any question, drop down in the comment section or feel free to DM me. I'm always open. See you in the next video.